What's going on, everyone? Thanks for checking out 6 Point Survival. Today we are learning about how to get a fire going in the rain or if it's soaking wet out. There will be no shortage of awesome puns on my wood or getting wet. Let's check it out. All right, first thing I'm going to do is pick a spot to actually build my fire and get some kind of shelter up. If you don't have any shelter material, you're going to have a much harder time with this. You can try and find somewhere with good canopy coverage. If you're building it in the snow, don't build a fire underneath a tree. That snow is going to start to melt off and fall on you and extinguish your fire. So snow, stay out from under trees. Rain, get under some trees, get under a canopy to help protect. I have a tarp, so we're going to find a flat area that we would want to hang out for a while, and we are going to set up a shelter. Let's do it. If you're looking for a quick, easy way to organize your lines, check out this link. When I'm setting up my shelter, I want to make sure that it's angled. That way water doesn't pool on top. You could also do this out of natural materials. It's obviously going to be quite a bit more work, but definitely something you could do. If it was really windy, I would also consider getting this shelter to be tied all the way down to the ground with the back of it facing the wind. That way it could work as a wind block for you. You shouldn't need to do that today, but it is an option. I want this thing high enough that I can fit under it. I could have my fire under it and also help work with the elements, not against them. So all the rain should shed off and block wind if needed. Where you're building your fire, if you build your fire towards the back of the shelter, the flames are going to be closer to your tarp, more likely for damage. Also, the smoke is going to come up the tarp. So even though it might be more comfortable to stand towards the front, I want to actually build the fire at the front, and then I'm going to be hanging out towards the back of this thing. If I need to go up with it later, I can, but just think about that as you start to dig out a fire circle and set up your prep work. All right, so to get a fire going, we need to follow the fire triangle. Fire triangle is heat, oxygen, and fuel. Heat is going to be a heat source. Today we're going to use a ferro rod. Oxygen exists around us. We can have too much or too little oxygen, but too much oxygen is going to basically be wind to blow your fire out. And then your fuel. The problem with a day like today is everything is soaked. There's no shortage of awesome tinder laying around on the ground. There's pine needles, there's deer moss. It's all soaking wet. None of it's going to work. So we need to find a different source of fuel, and that's going to be found in standing trees. Today we're just going to be using a small 7-inch saw and a fixed blade knife. We're not going to have an axe or a chainsaw or anything like that. So when we are using smaller tools, we're going to be looking for smaller trees. I really wouldn't go anything bigger than about 4 inches in diameter, so about the size of like a Nalgene bottle or some kind of hydro flask bottle. Smaller stuff's just going to be easier to work with. If you're in an area that has a lot of trees, then even smaller than that, maybe Coke can diameter, is really what you're looking for. It's going to be easier to use, easier to break down. If you start getting into really big fuels, you're going to waste a lot of energy trying to break that stuff down. As we're walking around, like I said, I want to find a standing tree. If you're somewhere that it snows a lot or rains a lot like it does here in North Florida, I want to find something that still has the top on it. As rain and snow seeps into the top of a tree, if it's snapped off, you're going to start to get a lot of rotten wood in there. So you want to avoid that. And then I want to find a tree that has died recently, meaning it still has the bark on it. If the bark has fallen off, that means it's been dead for a while. And again, you're going to likely deal with there being rotten wood inside there. So like I said, we're looking for a standing tree, one with a top on it, and one that still has the bark on it. Ideally something that is a pine tree or pine tree-esque. Doesn't necessarily have to be pine, but those softer straight grain woods are really what we're looking for. All right, we are gonna go on a firewood walk. today we are just going to be using split wood. If you want to see other videos on how to use stuff like ground wood, creating grass into firewood or fire logs for you, using something called squaw wood, which is the dead branches at the bottom of trees. Even if the tree is alive, the stuff right here will still burn. Not ideal for a wet day though. So today we're just gonna look at taking down trees, but if you wanna see these other kind of fires, make sure you subscribe. We'll be posting videos all year. All right, the first thing we're looking for is a tree to take down. I already brought it up, but we're looking for something that has bark on it, something that's a manageable size. This stuff right here is pretty small, probably not going to be worth my time to use to break up as prep. However, I could come back to this and use it as fuel later. I'm really looking for something that's pretty close to soda can size. Right here, there is another piece, another dead tree. This thing's pretty wiggly. It doesn't have a top on it. Top's missing, and towards the base the bark is missing, so that tells me that this is likely going to be rotten wood. It's pretty easy to push it over and check, but we're going to avoid ground wood for the same reason. So as I stepped on that, the top of it literally just snapped off. All right, that is not good to start a fire with, so avoid this. We call it punky or rotten wood. If I can take it and break pieces off with my fingers, it's not going to be good. Even if it's a little bit harder, if it breaks off easy and breaks down, stay away from that. We need to find something with a top on it, or if we can find more pitch wood, then we will do that. When I come over, this is pretty good size for what I'm looking at for this fire. This has a top on it. I can see pine needles on this. If you don't know, if you're trying to start a fire, don't use a tree that's alive. There's moisture inside that wood. So I'm going to avoid that as much as possible. It's not going to light for me. You're just going to end up battling this thing constantly, and you're not going to get a good fire going. What we're looking for is something like that. If you look up and you can't see any needles or anything that indicates it's alive, we can check what's called the Cambium layer. The Cambium layer is the layer that's in between the bark and the wood itself. In a live tree, that's going to be kind of like a fleshy for white people color, right? It's going to be close to the color of my flesh here, like a pinky color. When it's dead, right, it turns brown, just like a lot of stuff does. So that's what I'm looking for when I check the Cambium layer. I can also put my lips on the wood, literally. Your lips are really sensitive to moisture and are going to pick that up easier than any other part of your body. My hands are wet, I'm working out here. You're not going to feel the moisture nearly as easy with your hands as you are with your lips. So I'm going to set this camera down and let's check the Cambium layer, and I'll show you what you're looking for. Okay, this fleshy color right here, that is my Cambium layer, and that tells me that this tree is alive and that this wood is not going to be good. I have seen people say to dig the tip of your knife in and snap it and listen for the sound. I don't find that to be super reliable. And depending on the quality of your knife, I have seen people break the tip of their knives off in trees. So I avoid doing that. This is just as reliable, if not more reliable. So I always check the Cambium layer. If I don't see any needles on the trees, no other indicators that it's alive, I do that with every tree before I use it for fire, because I have had a time where I took a tree down that I thought was dead and it wasn't, and it was a massive waste of time. All right, guys, I think I found my tree I'm gonna go for. The base of this thing is pretty close to Coke can size. As I'm looking up towards the top, there are no needles on that thing. Well, let's check the Cambium layer, see what it looks like. Bark came off nice and easy. So bark came off easy, that's a great indicator, but the Cambium layer has almost rotted away on this tree. But it would be this brown right here. Again, it's that connective layer between the bark and the wood itself. This is our tree. Let's take it. Something else I want to consider before I really cut on this thing is the top of it. If the top breaks off and falls, call it a widowmaker, but basically you could have a 50, 70, 80 pound piece of wood falling and landing on the back of your head. So give it a shake, see if it's going to snap easily. You could kick it, but something you always want to be aware of. That way you're not getting domed. All right, so I'm going to use the terms fatwood and pitch interchangeably. Pitch is essentially what is inside the wood to make it fatwood. What we're looking at is as a tree dies, there's sap inside that tree. That sap will recede or can recede into certain parts of the wood, and that is going to create essentially a waterproof wood. So that sap hardens in there, and then it creates a wood that won't absorb moisture. It doesn't rot or break down, and it repels the water. I'm looking for that in a few different places. We can find it in lower branches on pine trees. So the branch has died and it will be in there. I can also look for something like this. This is a gray piece of wood. You can see this right here. All the bark has come off of this and most of the wood has rotted away. There's also another piece of this right here on the ground, right? So I can tell a lot of this tree has rotted away and I'm left with just this core piece here in the middle. When I grab it or twist it, there's nothing that's flaking off, which means all of the rot has already rotted away. And that's a really good indicator that this is going to be fatwood. So this is what I'm looking for. I can tell down here in the bottom, the rest of the tree has rotted away. I have this piece right here that's gonna have pitch in it, and this spire right here, it goes up, it broke off. That is all going to be awesome wood for getting a fire lit. That is fatwood. All right, so I just took down this little pitch spire or fatwood spire. We got this really nice dark purple color. I can smell it from here. It's a little bit sticky. It tells me that there's sap in that. I can also smell it. It smells like pine sol, but that is what I'm looking for fatwood. But I need to start breaking this stuff down into my different prep sizes. So you're gonna have your fuel sizes, which is just the big stuff that's gonna burn. But then I also need a tinder and a kindling. The tinder is what's going to take the initial spark or heat and light. That's going to be something that has a really low flash point. You can find natural tinders, you can get store-bought ones. Cotton ball and Vaseline's awesome. Today I'm going to use what's called Heartwood Shavings. So I'm going to do this all out of the tree itself or the wood. I'll show you how to do that even if it's soaking wet. And then your kindling is going to be kind of the connective layer between your tinder and your fuels. Your fuels need to be broken down small enough to light. For inner wood or heartwood that we're going to use, you want to go about pencil size for your smallest stuff. So we'll go pencil, then about the size of your thumb, then closer to the size of your wrist, and you can build up from there. So that's how we're going to actually break this stuff down. If you have a ring of the tree where there's a lot of knots like this, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 sticks growing out right there, try to put those towards the end of your bolt. This being a bolt of wood, it'll split a lot easier. Wood selection is going to be important when I'm doing this. So this bigger piece of wood right here that has this big branch coming out, this is going to be a pain in the butt to split up for my prep. So I'll save this. I'll still use it as a fuel piece, but not something I'm going to try and split up into prep to actually get my fire started. Now we're going to process the pitch spire that I got. So same thing, we'll just cut this one into bolts, same size bolts. Something you can do as well if you have a saw to process your wood. If you don't, you can wedge this thing in between 2 trees and snap it. But if you want to get a head start on processing your wood, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut about halfway through this. This doesn't have to do with pitch. This can just be your pine bolts like the ones I processed right here. But I'm going to cut about halfway through, and then I'll cut a whole nother bolt all the way through, and I'll show you how we can get it to split without actually having to put the effort in of using our knife to do it. In my experience, if you have a can saw, so If you're familiar with them, they come in a little can, or if you're not familiar with them rather, they come in a little can. It's like a chainsaw almost, and it has two handles on it, and you pull back and forth. This technique isn't going to work great using those because it's a rounded cut. We're looking for a straight cut. So if you have this, you have a multi-tool with a saw on it, this would work as well. But I cut about halfway through right here. Now I'm going to cut a whole nother bolt length off. Pitch is going to be harder because that resin has built up in there. So don't be surprised if this feels more difficult. If you're able to find FATWOOD, it is going to be a little harder to process. So what I'm going to try and do here, doesn't work all the time, but I'm going to try and split this down this piece of wood without using a knife. All I'm going to do is go up. I'm going to have the split side towards the tree, and I'm just going to start bonking it on the tree. I'm not going to hit super hard, or else you'll just finish breaking this cut right here, which is not what I want. Again, what I'm trying to do is get this to split open all the way down. Just like that. That's what I'm looking for. Now I can flip it around, take the side that just split, and do it again. There we go. Okay, next step is going to be to process this wood down. When I'm thinking about processing it, I want to break it down from biggest to smallest, meaning I don't want to break down and make feather sticks from my Heartwood shavings first. We're in Florida, it's humid here. If you're anywhere that's humid, or even if it's raining out, you're obviously going to have humidity in the air. That's going to absorb moisture into that smaller wood first. So I am going to break my prep work down, which I have down here. Whoa, that way, down here. I'm going to break that down with the biggest stuff in mind first. If you don't have a saw, here's another way to break down bolts of wood. Find two trees like these guys right here. Use them as a wedge. My strong recommendation is to push, not pull. So get the end of it on there. I'm going to wedge it right here. It should split somewhere behind this tree. So this is for my platform that I'm building. I'm going to just break this one in half. You can pull, but if it does snap and snaps hard, you're going to hit yourself in the chest or in the face or wherever you're pulling it towards. If you're pushing, you're just going to fall over. Just like that. Let's get some more. All right, there's my platform wood. I have the best wood. Actually, to be fair, the best wood is FATWOOD. Ask anybody, they'll tell you. You want FATWOOD. Splitting this stuff down, we're going to use the Baton method or the beater method. I've heard it called both things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find a piece of wood. Again, I've already said this, but wood selection is important here. If you have a piece of wood that has a bunch of sticks growing out of it, each one of those sticks is going to be a knot inside the wood, and it's going to make this really difficult to split. This is worth also mentioning again that this is why it's important to use soft, straight grain wood. If you're using twisted grain wood, which is predominantly in deciduous trees, or like trees that aren't pine trees that don't grow straight up, they're going to have more twisted fibers to them, and it's typically a harder or more dense wood, making this entire thing more difficult. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife, and I'm going to set the hilt of the knife, or basically the bottom of the blade, right up against the wood. If your blade goes all the way to your handle, then put your handle all the way up against the wood, but mine doesn't. So I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to put this on my working platform, and then I'm going to take another stick, something that has a little bit of weight but is also easy to handle. Everyone's a little bit different on that. And just like a baseball bat, that one's actually a little bit thick. Let's use, if you use a rotten piece of wood, this is going to be self-critiquing, something like that. Just like with the baseball bat, you're trying to hit the ball on the last couple inches. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to take this and I'm going to start hitting the back of my blade, and I have this blade right in the middle of the wood. If you picked a larger piece of wood, you could always go off to the side and cut off little pieces, but I really want to avoid that. It's just going to be problematic for you, and it's usually going to shear off like halfway through. You want to try and get nice clean splits all the way down here. So I'm going to take this and start hitting the back. When I'm doing that, if I just hit the back without putting pressure on this handle, you're going to get this to happen. So I want to try and keep this as straight as I can going down. So make sure you put good pressure here. And get your wood to split just like that. Once this is split, this is a pretty thin piece. I'll set this off to the side, and we're going to split it up even further using something called the throttle method, but we're not going to worry about that just yet. Right now, I'm just trying to process this down into manageable fuel size pieces. So when I say fuel size piece, basically anything bigger than your thumb is what I'm talking about. This bark does have a lot of moisture in it, so at some point you can do it now or you can do it later, doesn't really matter. Just take your knife and try and scrape that off. That's going to help this lay a little bit better. Once that comes off though, make sure that you're keeping it underneath your shelter. All right, I'm gonna set this up where it's not all the way through. So sometimes as you're working it down, your knife will start to come out like this. So we have some of our blade over here. If you have a larger piece of wood or a shorter knife, this is going to be problematic. So just start hitting the top and then bottom of the wood, and that'll work it back down your blade. And now you're going to have more to work with over here. If you get to the point where your knife gets stuck like this, I could go all the way through here, or what I can do is use another log and split this open. You might have to use something that's already split, that's a little bit thinner to wedge it down in here. Or if you have a bigger gap up top, like I have here, I can get just a full round bolt of wood here, put it in, and just do the same thing with the beater stick and open it up like that. If you have a cheaper knife, I would recommend doing that anyways. I would not try and wail on a cheaper knife for an entire fire. You're gonna risk breaking your blade if you don't have a full tang. So you'll break the knife off of the handle. If you start bending your knife, you might want to abandon this method. I have bent knives in half and broken them in half building a fire like this before. Is take the tip of my knife. I always take the blade away from me as I slide this piece of wood in. If the blade is facing towards me, you have a higher chance of sliding it into your hand and cutting your hand on your blade. So make sure your blade's facing away from you. I'm gonna go at the end inch of the wood, okay? And I'm gonna go somewhere towards the middle. I wanna bring the knife and the wood up together. I'm gonna get a good hand on this. I'm gonna bring them up together and then smash them down nice and hard, and it should split all the way through this piece of wood. So we'll go like this. Okay, I got my initial split right there. And now I'm going to turn the handle on my knife like a throttle on a motorcycle. That's going to continue the split, and then I'm going to push this piece of wood into the blade. So if it's stuck in the wood, that's fine, but I'll throttle and move. And I can move this back here as well, but I'll split that all the way down, just like that. If you have a piece of wood with a knot in it right there, and you're using this throttle method, I'm going to try and get that knot out. It's going to cause me problems if I don't. I'm going to do that by putting the tip of my knife directly in the middle, and then try and just split right through it, just like that. This is a good amount that I can start breaking this down into my next smaller stage, which is going to be that pencil stage. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just looking to make it smaller. If I have nice, long, straight grain pieces like this, I'm setting them aside. This is what I'm going to use for feather sticks and heartwood shavings. So I'm not going to split these up and use them. You can if you want, if you have a different tinder especially, but I'm saving them for that because I'm doing this fire out of all natural materials. So just got to the point where I can't wrap my fingers around it. That's about what I'm looking for to get a fire started. Like I said, it doesn't hurt to have more, but you're going to kick yourself if you did all this work, burn through all of your prep, and don't get your fire started. All right, so the next part of this is going to be to make feather sticks and then on to heartwood shavings. Those will be the first two things that I'll light. The heartwood shavings are my tinder, the feather sticks are my kindling, and then we have our fuels over here that we just broke up. When you're doing this, it's really important not to get your stuff wet. So I'd recommend not touching it with gloves. You can keep your gloves on while you're working, but we'd really want to try and avoid that. When I'm looking to do heartwood shavings, I am going to find a piece of wood that, or rather, when I'm looking to do feather sticks, I want to find a piece of wood that is nice and straight grained, and I want to try to not make this out of the outside edge. That's going to be more, it's going to have a more tendency to be wet, and I don't want to get my stuff, I don't want to introduce any moisture into these stages. So try and find a piece that is an internal part of the wood, or you can use your FATWOOD. Wood selection is super important while you're doing this. Make sure that you have a good piece of wood. Again, we're looking for nice straight grain. We're looking for something that isn't on the outside edge, and we're looking for something that doesn't have any knots in it. All of those are going to make this more difficult. I've seen some really cool videos on feather sticks. If you want to take hours and hours of practice to make these big, beautiful feather sticks, great. It's really unnecessary to get your fire started. All I need is probably 10 feather sticks with like 10 feathers each on them is going to be plenty. There we go. I like that more. Losing a lot less feathers this way. There we go. That's really what I'm looking for right there, to have the feather stick broke off and turn into like my pencil size prep. Doesn't mean these other small ones won't work, but once we go to light, you'll see why this is easier. That is plenty. Now we're going to actually prep where we're going to build our fire, and we're going to do that before we make our heartwood shavings, just because how quickly they can absorb moisture. And we will need a brace. So what a brace does, once we go to actually light our fire, is it's going to keep the flames themselves, or the wood itself, off of the flames. I can use this to my advantage if it's windy. If there's some breeze, I can use the brace here to protect my small flames. Or if it's not getting enough oxygen, this can be used to lift and allow more oxygen to get underneath once I actually go to light this thing. I'm gonna work in stages. So we're gonna do our Heartwood shavings. That's what we'll actually light. Then we'll add our feather sticks on top. And then we will start adding our different fuel size pieces, working from the pencil size up to the larger stages. Now we need to make Heartwood shavings so I can use my hat to catch this stuff. How we're gonna do this is I'm going to find a nice straight grain piece of wood, ideally something that you can hold in your pants or in your belt like this. I'll put one end into my hat because that's what I'm going to catch with. I'm going to get my fixed blade knife and I'm just going to scrape down like this. Okay, my knife, I can angle it slightly down, but I'm going to hold part of my knife like this and start scraping. Okay, that should about do it. Again, this is very sensitive to moisture, so I'm gonna make sure and take off my gloves before we light. Your brace should be slightly taller than your tinder. So if you're using a man-made tinder and it's small, you want a smaller brace. That way your feather sticks and all of your prep wood is actually on the flame. For proper lighting on this, I'm gonna put my ferro rod towards the base and just slightly inside to strike on this. I'm going to use the side of it and strike down just like that, and that's going to throw out a nice hot flame. If this is a little bit more wet or if you're having difficulties, you can scrape some of the metal off and then light that, and it'll do a little bit extra burn just like that. What do you think? You think we're going to get it to light in the first strike? Put it in the comments. See if you're right. Okay, so it lit first strike. I'm going to now take my feather sticks. I have a nice big bundle. I'm going to put those directly on, up on the brace though. Make sure you use that brace. And those are going to start burning just like that. Now I'm going to take a small handle or handful of my pencil size prep. I'm going to go up on the brace and I'm going to lay it over the flames, and I want them spread out like this. You don't want to just throw a handle on. I want to spread them out and lay them across just like that. I'll grab another handful of my pencil size stuff, and it's pretty leaned down. So what I can do is I can get another small piece of prep wood here like this, set it up here, and now I want to start switching directions and allowing this stuff to catch. So the last ones went on this way, now we'll go on this way. We're going to do a log cabin fire lay. There's a bunch of different fire lays. You can use different ones for different reasons, but log cabin's just a pretty simple, straightforward one. That's essentially just like Lincoln logs going back and forth. My initial lay though that I want to get this thing lit is to get all of your prep wood right on top. I've used all my pencil size prep. Now I'm going to start using my thumb size stuff. This stuff I'm going to be a little bit more meticulous. Lay it on one piece at a time. And just start going back and forth like this, building this thing up. Thanks so much for checking out the video, guys. This was how to make a fire in a wet environment or in the rain. As you can see, we got our fire going nice and easy for us. If you have suggestions on a future video you'd like to see, put it in the comments. I definitely go through those, check them out, and would love to make a video more specific to exactly what you're wondering or learning about. Thanks again. See you. All right, here's your challenge. Go out, wait till it's a wet day out, wait till right after it rains or while it's raining, even better, and get yourself a fire started. This is not an impossible task. I've seen it time and time again where people struggle and fail to start a fire because they're not following basic fire principles. So when you do this challenge for yourself, remember the fire triangle. Remember to do your best to keep everything as dry as you possibly can. Either get a shelter up or get under some kind of protection. If you get a fire going, leave it in the comments. We'd love to see it. See ya.